welcome to Kepster ADV, the channel dedicated to riding, adventure, and life's journey, which is always best made on a motorcycle. Today I'm excited about this episode. I'm outside of Lovelock, Nevada at the Lovelock Cave. This is an episode I've been wanting to do for some time, but it was probably about a 10-hour ride for me to get up here, the end of which was miles and miles of dirt road, but it was really clean dirt road, well graded. So if any of you are planning on coming up here on your adventure bike, don't be deterred by the dirt road. It's actually really nice, almost like a super highway. So the reason I'm excited about this is because it deals with a topic that I think is really interesting, and that's giants. Now, 10 years ago, if you would have said anything about giants, I would have said you're crazy. But as time goes by, and the more and more I hear and read about giants, I'm starting to wonder if there might not have been giants in our past. Now, I've had to kneel down here. The wind has really started picking up since I started, and I don't want to ruin the quality of the audio with the wind. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about this legend of the Paiute Indians and the Redheaded giants. Now, there was a woman named Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, and she was a granddaughter or a great-granddaughter of Chief Winnemucca, who was one of the chiefs of the Paiute Indians and who the town of Winnemucca is named after. And she's written several books about the history of the Paiutes and about the life of the Paiute Indians. And, she tells this tale about these red-headed giants. So these red-headed giants, were a thorn in the side of the Paiutes throughout time. This area used to have a giant lake. And so down the hill from the cave where I'm sitting, and I'll show you here momentarily, was a giant lake which has since dried up. At the time, around the edges of this lake grew tules in the swampy area. And tules were a type of reed, and both the giants and the Indians, the Paiutes, used these to weave into baskets, into sandals, clothing, what have you. And so apparently these giants would lay in wait at the edge of these tules, and when some unsuspecting Paiute Indian would come by, they'd snatch them up and they'd haul them back to this cave here where the poor Indian would be killed and eaten. Now, there was a story about a woman who had just given birth, and she's carrying her baby, and she was warned by a passerby or somebody that the giants were coming. And she hid in a little hut and, tried to keep the baby quiet. And a giant approached and apparently heard the baby, and he came into the hut, took the baby, and took off with it. Well, when the word of this spread around, the Paiutes decided, we got to do something about these giants. Now, they had made several attempts to ask the giants to be like them and to not eat people. And the giants never agreed. But at this point, it was too late. They needed to do something about these giants. So a number of the Paiutes came up to the edge of the cave here, and they stacked a bunch of wood in all the openings of the cave, which there are several right here, and they lit it on fire. And they yelled into the cave, "If you'll be like us and not eat people, we will let you live." And there was no response. And they asked, "Will you be like us and not eat people?" And again, no response. So they stoked up the fire, and they let this fire burn, and they kept the fire going until they were quite sure that the giants inside could not have survived it. Now, the story kind of ends there for a long time, but in 1911, they started doing some, archaeological digs around the area. And there was someone who told them about this cave and about finding artifacts in this cave. Some researchers came and they took a look around, but it was full of bat guano. And at the time, bat guano was very valuable, and it was used for fertilizing fields in some of the agricultural areas around. And some guano miners realized how much guano there was and what kind of money they could make if they harvested all this guano. So they came up here in, I believe it was 1923, and they were harvesting the guano, and they stumbled upon lots of artifacts. And they started hauling some of these artifacts out, and there were so many that they ended up calling in the University of Berkeley, who came and cataloged all the artifacts they had found. But one thing that was found deep down in the cave was a couple of giant skeletons. So, this had all been chalked up as an Indian legend and a fable, but they found these two skeletons. Now, when I'm saying giant skeletons, bear in mind that people were much smaller at this point in time. So what I read was that there was a skeleton that was over 6 foot, and there was another skeleton that was over 6.5 foot. So for that time, they were considered giants. And one of the bodies was partially mummified and had red hair. Now, Sarah Winnemucca Parker, I think I got that name wrong. Anyway, Sarah Winnemucca, she wrote a book about this, but she also went around and spoke to groups of people about the life of the Paiutes and about these giants in particular. And she wore a dress that was fringed in red hair. And she claimed that this dress had been handed down from generation to generation in her family, and that the red hair was actually the red hair from the Redheaded giants. So a very interesting tale, and there could be some credibility to it, especially with the fact that the giants were a little over 6 foot and a little over 6.5 feet. So let's go take a look around. A quick online search will reveal many articles, mostly from the late 1800s and early 1900s, of giant remains being found all over the United States. So I just came down from the opening of the cave, and now I'm standing on a wooden platform that was built here for us tourists. But one particular thing I wanted to show you, I'm not sure how well my flashlight is going to do at showing you that, but if you look at the ceiling of the cave, it almost looks charred, especially how some areas are the natural rock colored and there's other areas that are the black. Now, could this have been done by some naturally occurring phenomenon? Very likely so, or possibly so. But if it is charring, it would certainly go along with the story of the Paiutes burning the red-headed giants in the cave. Now, we're not supposed to get off of the platform here, so I'm just going to kind of show you. The cave is good sized, but it's not huge. But it certainly is plenty big for some 6 to 6.5 foot so-called giants to live in. Quite comfortably, actually. Now, bear in mind, this has been excavated, and I read that they pulled like 10,000 artifacts out of this cave, including some very large sandals, and of course, the two mummified corpses, one being over 6 foot, one being over 6.5 feet tall. I'm coming down the platform, and as you can see, there's other entrances here that lead to the outside. And there's a big crack right there, and I would love to be able to get off this platform and go explore it. But I'm going to follow the rules. Again, the charring on the ceiling. I'm standing here with a new friend I met, Luis, and Luis has a background in geology, and he's currently a forester. And he has a little more information about the water that used to be in the area here. So Luis, why don't you tell us a little bit about what used to be out here?
Yeah, so in Pleistocene, around 20 to 10,000 years ago, was the last kind of major ice age called the Wisconsin glaciation. Evidence for it was found in Wisconsin. During this glaciation, glaciers came down way past the current present day, up down into central Canada, sometimes even to the northern United States. And the runoff, all that melt, would support these giant lakes here in what's called the Basin Range, stretches from the Sierra Nevada on the west to the Wasatch Front on the east, filled with large lakes. The lake that was here was Lake Lahontan, thousands of acres and millions of acres in size, thousands of feet in depth. It would fill all these valleys. Reno would be underwater, Lovelock just outside would be underwater. And that created a microclimate here. You had lakefront property to this cave. We all know and value how lakefront property today, well, it wasn't too different back then as well. You had lakefront property here, so you had a sufficient supply of fresh water just outside your doorstep. You had meadow environments supporting all sorts of vegetation for food, and of course other mammals like lakefront environments for the diversity of plants and food that they could be found and foraged here. So making this an ideal setting for generations of probably inhabitants. Lake Lahontan has since dried up. This is a natural part of the climate change. We are currently around it, part of it, natural part of the climate change. But since then, the Earth has warmed to, we no longer have glaciers coming down these ways. We no longer have those water bodies feeding these ancient lake tubs that we remain here. And also there's a similar one, Lake Bonneville in Utah. And so nowadays we're stuck in giant deserts. But the evidence of these lakes are all around us, both geologically, you can see kind of cliffs and ancient shorelines, and archaeologically too. One would never inhabit this now. It was a present day desert in front of your doorstep with few resources. But back in the day, you would. Would make sense.
So it probably also supported a lot of wildlife that could have been hunted and,
absolutely,
and food animals. I asked you about the possible scorching on the roof of this, and you felt that it was scorching. Now, you also mentioned that you find that in a lot of caves. And of course, the legend that I was looking into was the Paiutes burning the redheaded giants. But this could have also been some just from it being inhabited. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they would burn, have fire pits, both for cooking and for warmth in the winter months, or even just colder, end of season time period. And yeah, I do commonly see similar scorch marks from just fire pits as well. To keep in mind that this likely wasn't the former level of the ground level of the cave. It could have been much higher as well, likely was, as this was excavated and whatnot and mined for guano. So it's not hard for a fire pit to just scorch up into the roof and make all these. So no, this strikes me as likely from fire pits within the cave, causing heat and burning this limestone above us.
Are you familiar with the story of the redheaded giants?
I've never heard of that.
Okay. I was going to see if I could get your take on it. Now, for our viewers out there, do you have any social media where you'd like to be looked up, or do you have a YouTube channel? Or
no YouTube channel. Pretty much my main social media is Instagram, Luis_in_nature. I just post all sorts of kind of, my degree's in geology. My work is forestry, so all sorts of things natural. It's kind of my passion and my bread and butter. So I like to post and teach people content there.
In what area of the country do you work out of?
I work in California presently.
Okay, and northern, southern?
Northern California, yeah.
Okay, very good. I really appreciate your input on this.
Of course, thank you.
So when you come inside the cave, there's really not a whole lot to see. It's a fairly small cave. It's not a big cave system. There is a crack at one end I would love to be able to explore, but we're not supposed to get off of the platform, so I'm going to obey those rules to keep this place open for future visitors. Now, this is the second video I've done in recent history of legends of Indians burning either an enemy tribe or redheaded giants in a cave. If you like this kind of content, check out my other video titled The Apache Death Cave. It's kind of a similar story to this, but it was Apaches being burned instead of redheaded giants. But I'm glad I finally got to make this trip. I've had a plan for some time. It took me about 10 hours to ride up here, And about the last, I would say at least 15 miles is on dirt road. Very nicely graded dirt road, so if you're coming up here on your adventure bike, don't be intimidated by that. There wasn't any soft sand spots. It was nicely graded the whole way. I was able to, go 55, 60 pretty much the entire way. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Kepster ADV. Boy, how cool was it to meet Luis, someone with the kind of knowledge background that he has. He's going to be the star of this show for sure. Well, thank you for watching. I recently ended my 25-year career due to vaccine mandates. And so I'm taking a little trip around the United States now. This is my first stop, Lovelock, Nevada. Moving on to Utah, I'm going to go up to Devil's Tower, Mount Rushmore, Sturgis. I'm going to be ending up in Tennessee to visit my daughter, and then I'm going to be taking the southern route back. I'm going to do some research along the way and try to find some interesting places to show you on my way back. So again, thank you for watching Kepster ADV. Please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you like the content you saw here today, check out my video on the Apache Death Cave. It was a very interesting place to visit.